What to expect in 2025 along the Oregon coast. In this video, we're going to talk about some of the changes we expect to see coming in 2025, maybe some of the things to look out for. So if you're thinking about moving to the Oregon coast in the next year, or maybe any time in the near future, stick around. You want to watch this video. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel Living on the Oregon Coast. I'm your host Seth Marchant, licensed real estate broker in Oregon and Washington. Or if you're new to this channel, Living on the Oregon Coast, we show you what it's like to eat, sleep, play, all the pros and cons. We've got tons of driving and drone footage on this channel, really giving you an idea of what it's like to live along the Oregon coast. So if you want to see more videos like this, make sure and subscribe. Today, we're going to look ahead to 2025 and maybe look at some of the differences or some of the things that we might expect to be a little bit different for this year. And this might sound a little bit cliche, but I want to start actually with the weather, because the weather has been kind of different over the past few years. Anybody that's been living along the Oregon coast can probably testify to that. And 2025 is probably not going to be a whole lot different. We're probably going to expect to see some weather that maybe we haven't seen so much in past decades. So it's the beginning of the year. We're in January. Have not seen any snowfall yet. Typically, it does not snow along the Oregon coast. And if it does snow, usually just lasts for a very short period of time. Usually doesn't stick. If it does stick, maybe it might last for like an hour or two. You get some slush building up on the road, things like that. But over the past few years, we actually have had snow accumulate and pretty good along the Oregon coast in some places. Now, you're not going to need to go out and buy snow tires or anything like that, but if you're not used to driving in snow, especially when you're driving in places that have a lot of elevation, a lot of slopes, it's not very flat along the Oregon coast. You know, it can be very treacherous. So that's definitely going to be something to watch out. Another thing, too, another place where you might encounter snow is if you travel to the valley, you know, from the Oregon coast, let's say to Portland to go to the airport, you do pass over the coastal range, which you're usually going to get up around maybe like 1,600 feet in a lot of places, which is a high enough elevation to accumulate some snow throughout the wintertime. So definitely always do a trip check before you do a drive. In the wintertime, whether you're going up and down the coast or over the coastal range. Another thing it felt like we saw more of in 2024 than ever before, and so I'm thinking we're probably going to see more of this in 2025, is road closures or just roads that are in really, really bad shape. There's some places along the 101, that's the highway that parallels the Oregon coast, that are just chronically bad. There's places where the road is always, how do I describe, not necessarily like big potholes, but lots of big bumps where you really got to slow down, almost like you're off-roading. And there's a lot of places where that just kind of persists. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I've been told there are some places where the ground just continues to move. And we've got a lot of erosion along the Oregon coast. So it doesn't make sense for the city or whoever, ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation, whoever is responsible for the particular part of road in question. It doesn't make sense for them to fix the road because it's just going to do the same thing again. So maybe a lot of small fixes, patchwork, things like that. But there are places along the Oregon coast where you might get stopped due to road work. So again, another reason why you should always do a trip check before you go somewhere. Now, another thing that we've seen kind of in conjunction with that is a lot of downed trees. That's not too uncommon, but I will say last year, I feel like I saw more downed trees, particularly after one storm that we had last winter, than I've ever seen in my entire life, especially right outside of Newport for whatever reason, like headed towards Toledo on 20. Looking out into the forest, there was like dozens, hundreds of trees, just endless, it seemed like endless amounts of trees that had fallen over. So if anything is similar about 2025 compared to 2024, Might expect to see some big storms again where we see a lot of downed trees. Now, the next question with that, of course, is power outages. What are power outages like along the Oregon coast? Well, from my experience, actually not too bad. From the looking that I did online, I couldn't find anything that said that people were without power for more than a day anywhere along the Oregon coast. Now, there's a lot of towns along the Oregon coast, it's a lot of real estate, it's a lot of lands, so we do cover every inch as far as helping people buy homes. But there's a lot of little towns, so I'm not going to be privy to every single little market and how long somebody might have been without power. But for the most part, when power goes out, it's usually restored within a couple of hours. It's not the case that we would have days and days without power. But trees do come down, they knock down power lines, and occasionally you do go without power. I have seen in Oregon, and with some of the other things, some other weather events that we've had, I have seen reasons for people to buy generators that had maybe never considered generators before. So it's becoming a little bit more common. We've had a few ice storms that have also caused power outages. And if you're wondering, if you're probably in Southern California, if you're not familiar with the Oregon coast and you're watching this right now, you're probably really wondering, forest fires, what are the forest fires along the Oregon coast? What are they like? Well, it's not really a thing. Of course, due to moisture, of course. We've got a lot of moisture. That's one of the downsides. People complain about the rain, but that does prevent things like forest fires. A lot of along the Oregon coast is rainforest. So forest fires aren't really much of a thing along the Oregon coast. They do happen occasionally. I do recall last summer there was a little bit of, I don't even know if you would call it a forest fire, but in Seaside, I was maybe about 10 miles away at the time. So I could see the smoke. Looked like it was kind of coming from Tillamook Head, where I did that hike last week, or last month rather, if you want to check that out. And that lasted for no more than a day. So if something does break out along the Oregon coast, like a forest fire, they're usually not going to last for long. They're not going to spread. It's not the same type of threat like it is, in California. Now, beyond that, the other weather event that has made the news recently, apparently there's some volcano about 300 miles off the coast of, I think it's like just due west of Cannon Beach. That is predicted to happen in 2025. It's actually an underwater volcano, and I guess it's pretty deep underwater. I guess it's a pretty big thing, big deal, but it's going to be too far and too deep to actually cause a tsunami, which is also something that if you're thinking about moving along the Oregon coast, that's something that a lot of people consider. Driving along the Oregon coast, you're going to see signs for tsunamis. And we do get tsunamis along the Oregon coast. We've had tsunamis along the Oregon coast even in my lifetime. They just haven't been very big. We've had a couple very, very small tsunamis over the decades. There is talk of a very large tsunami coming. We've done a couple videos on this. It's also known as the big one. There's a plate off the Oregon. I think it goes down to California, up into Washington. The Juan de Fuca plate. I think it's like 100 miles off the coast. That is expected to move at some point in the near future. That will cause a massive tsunami that could do a lot of damage to the Oregon coast. Maybe think if you ever saw that tsunami about 20 years ago, 15 years ago in Japan. So massive levels of destruction won't be caused by that volcano, but that is an event that a lot of people, I guess like geology people are really looking forward to in 2025. Now, in conjunction with all that, I want to talk to you a little bit about the real estate market. As a real estate broker, we're going to see a little bit of changes in 2025 from 2024. One of the biggest things that we're seeing right now that's catching people off guard is insurance, and that's kind of a national story. I think everybody's homeowner's insurance is going up regardless of where you're at, regardless if you're in a high risk area or not. Now, you don't have to worry about forest fires like I mentioned along the Oregon coast, but you do have to worry about water. Flooding is a big one. Now, if you're using financing, your loan officer, your lender, they're going to require you to have the necessary insurance, whatever that may be. So you don't need earthquake insurance. Fire is going to be covered in your homeowner's insurance anyways. You may need flood insurance in some areas. If you are in a flood zone, the loan officer is going to require you to get flood insurance, and insurance has gone up dramatically in price. So much so that we've even heard of some people canceling their contract because it made their mortgage payment go up so much that it became unaffordable to them. Haven't really heard about that in Oregon. I don't anticipate that from Oregon, but I've heard that from other places. And I have seen some people along the Oregon coast, in some cases, have trouble finding insurance and at a minimum, paying more than they expected to pay. So if you are thinking about buying a home, in the past, homeowners insurance was sort of just an afterthought. It was something you kind of did at the end of the process when you're signing all of your documents with your loan officer, with your lender. But now it should be more of a consideration, given that, like I mentioned, it's actually killing some deals. So definitely look into insurance. And if you have questions about those things, if you have questions about is a home in like a flood zone, you can always get in touch with me. You can find all the contact information right here or just below. Now, as far as the overall real estate market as a whole, what do we expect for the Oregon coast in 2025? Don't expect actually too much to be different from 2024. One thing that so far that most of us had not really predicted is that rates are currently higher than a lot of us would have guessed about a year ago. So with rates being higher, that eliminates some buyers from the market with affordability being so high right now. So some people are stepping over to the sidelines to wait until rates go down. So that's taking some buyers out of the market, and that makes it tougher for sellers too. It makes it tough for a seller to get the most out of their home when they don't have a whole lot of buyers competing for that home. So I kind of see it being a tough market. Oregon coast is a little bit unique, though, in that does get a lot of retirees coming to it. And in general, this might sound a little bit high. It was actually, before I got into real estate, I wouldn't have guessed it was this high. But somewhere between a fifth and a quarter of transactions nationally are typically about are cash. So people that are cash, are not affected by rates. They don't care if rates go up. In fact, in some cases, it's going to be good for them if rates go up because there's less buyers out there for them to compete with, and they can get a better price from a seller. So there are a certain number of people that will be unaffected, and that percentage might be a little bit higher along the Oregon coast. We do see maybe a little bit more cash, a few more retirees along the Oregon coast than, say, the rest of Oregon. So for some people, the market might be good, but I'm predicting that we're not going to have a whole lot more inventory. So it's going to be another low inventory market because we're not going to see a whole lot more sellers coming to the market. We're not going to see a whole lot of sellers that want to trade their current 3 or 4% interest rate for a 7% interest rate. So for that reason, don't expect a whole lot more inventory. And rates were predicted to go down in 2025. They're still predicted to go down in 2025 as it stands right now. But I will tell you, I am more skeptical than I was before. I'm not going to be shocked if by the end of the year, we're still somewhere around the 7% that we're at right now. And I guess if I could give you one reason why, interest rates, mortgage rates follow the Fed rate. So when the Fed lowers rates, which they did 3 times last year, they did a quarter twice and half a point once, so a full interest rate, a full point lower. They lowered it in 2024, but rates didn't actually go down. What had happened was rates went down before that in anticipation of the Fed lowering the rate. And so it was already kind of priced in. And the other thing that affects rates is the 10-year Treasury. So that market, the investors that buy mortgage-backed securities also buy the 10-year Treasury. And so those two products compete with each other. And right now, the 10-year yield has been going up, ripping, as some people refer to it, pretty measurably, pretty fast. And so those mortgage-backed security products need more margin in order for that to be appealing to investors. So even though the Fed cut rates, lenders have to keep their rates higher so that they have more of a margin to compete with that 10-year. And I think we're going to see, it looks like we're going to see more of that in 2025. So if the Fed does cut rates again in 2025, which they are predicted to do, we don't necessarily think that that mortgage rates will follow those and necessarily go down. If I had to bet on it, rates at the end of the year are going to be lower than they are right now. I'm just not going to be shocked if they're not a whole lot different than they were. Again, a lot of people were predicting that they would be, about a point, maybe more, less a year ago than they are now. And the Fed did lower rates by a point, but there's other things that affect these mortgage interest rates. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on. Again, if you have more questions about that, I can get maybe a little bit more into detail if you want to get in touch with me. We've helped people buy homes and property from Brookings to Astoria and everything in between. Paul and I, not trying to brag or anything, but we are probably about as knowledgeable about the towns along the Oregon coast, the entire Oregon coast, as anybody out there. We mostly kind of service like central to the northern Oregon coast, but we have people on our team full-time living down on the southern Oregon coast as well. If I have time to get down there, I will help you and get down on the southern Oregon coast. If not, we have people down there on our team as well. So we have a really good sense of what the real estate market looks like along the entire Oregon coast. Again, get in touch if you have questions. Some of the other things I want to talk to you about along the Oregon coast, sometimes people will say, well, it's a little bit quiet along the Oregon coast. What is there to do? There is quite a few events along the Oregon coast. I'm going to share, I found a link that I don't think it has all the events, but I found a pretty comprehensive link that I will share in the description of this video. I'll share any other links that are kind of relevant to our discussion today too, to help you out. Again, these videos are really designed to be informative. So some of the events coming up for 2025, one of the biggest things, so one of the more popular things is to search for glass floats in Lincoln City. And this year is the 25th anniversary of that. And so in recognition of the 25th anniversary, they have so far, just this past weekend in January, put out an additional 100 glass floats. And so some of those are probably still out there. And they're going to be putting out additional floats, more floats than the previous year. So I know that's always really exciting for people that like to go and find those. Next month, we'll have Wine and Seafood Fest. Which is in Newport, the Newport Wine and Seafood Fest. Astoria has one a few months after that, but February is the Newport Wine and Seafood Fest, which is probably a little bit bigger than Astoria's. Not quite as big as it used to be, still kind of trying to, I think, get back to where we were pre-lockdown in 2020. They used to have like 3 really massive tents for Wine and Seafood Fest. Last year was just 1 tent. But there's still quite a few people that go to Newport. The whole city kind of rallies around it. There's buses that drive people around, so you don't have to worry about drinking and driving. The Astoria one's a little bit smaller, so if you don't like crowds as much, that might be a good one for you. Just beyond that, huge volleyball tournament that's in Seaside every year that's always fun to check out. Hood to Coast, which also ends in Seaside. Another big thing along the Oregon coast is 4th of July. I'm usually in Gearhart for the 4th of July, which is what you're looking at now. It's always kind of been big along the Oregon coast, 4th of July. I think pretty much every town has like some sort of parade like this, at least, not the super small towns, that the medium to the bigger sized towns have some sort of parade celebration. And the fireworks are huge too. I think part of the reason for that is fireworks are banned in Portland. And Portland is if you're not familiar with our geography, the most populous city in Oregon, just an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on where you live at in Portland, to the Oregon coast. So a lot of people go to the coast for 4th of July from Portland. And since they banned fireworks 2 years ago, starting probably to see even more people going to the Oregon coast. The reason why they banned fireworks too, by the way, if you are curious, there was a massive fire. It was almost 50,000 acres just east of Portland in our Columbia River Gorge that was started by a firework. Probably one of the biggest fires in our history. I haven't compared all the fires. Definitely some of the images were pretty incredible. And unfortunately, the Columbia River Gorge and a lot of the attractions up there, like hiking, there's a ton of hiking trails that attract a lot of people. All that stuff was closed for a year. And that brings me actually to another point too, that's going to be a little bit different for 2025. In the past in Oregon, kind of regardless of where you went, if you wanted to go hike somewhere, Usually you didn't have to do anything other than bring $5 with you. $5 for a day pass, which covers you and your parking. Whereas now we're starting to see some fees go up a little bit, starting to see some places where you might need to register to park in advance. So it's not just show up with $5 cash anymore. If you're going to hike somewhere, like anywhere in Oregon or along the Oregon coast, just check ahead and make sure you don't need to reserve something or that it doesn't cost more than $5. So anyways, Portland banned fireworks due to that happening. So a lot of people go to the Oregon coast for fireworks. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, because I have some of the similar feelings, like, and all of the trash that gets left over from the fireworks, because actually the fireworks shows along the Oregon coast are pretty impressive. In fact, some of the private shows, one of the ones I saw last year, at least it was my understanding that it was a private show on the North Coast, was just as good as some of the shows that the city were putting on. So lots of fireworks, lots of really incredible fireworks, also lots of garbage too. I will say that people, I think, usually do a pretty good job of cleaning up their garbage. So, for all the people out there that are like, that sounds terrible, fireworks on the coast with all the garbage, I think for the most part people are pretty responsible, because it's something that people have been doing for a long time. And like I said, a lot of people do it. So there's a lot of people out there kind of like self-policing that stuff. Beyond that, Cannon Beach Sandcastle Contest, Circles in the Sand in Bandon. If you've never heard of that before, definitely worth looking up. Reed Sport has a chainsaw carving championship. If you go through Reed Sport, you'll definitely see a lot of wooden carved statues. And other than that, we've got a lot of the other kind of like typical things, like, there's farmers markets in a lot of the towns that usually run like 3 or 4 months when the weather's pretty good throughout the year. Now, if there's other things that you want to know about living along the Oregon coast, we've got over 100 videos on our channel covering all of the major towns, pros and cons, cost of living, driving footage, drone footage, kind of everything that you might need to really get a feel for what it's like living along the Oregon coast. Again, myself and the other person that you'll see on this channel, Paul Clem, we've helped dozens of people over the years and continue to do so to relocate, retire to, buy investment properties, whatever it may be. If you're thinking about buying a property along the Oregon coast, or if you just have questions, I invite you to call, text, email. You can find all the contact information below in the description of this video, or you can hit the QR code if you're watching from TV. I know so many of you do. You tell me about that. That's why we added that QR code. And that'll take you to our website where you can find more of our information, including more of our videos. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this, make sure and subscribe to this channel. If this video was helpful for you, I'd appreciate it if you give me a like. Kind of lets me know what videos you guys like and what videos don't do as well. It kind of helps to shape our content. If you're looking at our channel, if you're familiar with our channel, you probably know that this channel is really just designed to be informative. So the more we can better understand what type of information people want, the better videos we can make. So if this video helped you, definitely give me a thumbs up and feel free to leave a comment. We'll reply back. Until next time, take care, everyone.